Hello YouTube. In this video I'm going to teach you how to build work capacity and how to align the level of cardio and the type of cardio you do to the specificity you need for your practice. If you're wondering about what I think about cardio and my philosophy surrounding cardio for bodybuilding purposes, I have linked the video in the description. When it comes to the topic at hand today, it's something that I've already discussed in the hypertrophy series, and I actually have a video about how to do more volume in your training, which in a sense is also a byproduct of a higher work capacity. But it's more a consequence of it than a way to build it, even though the two sometimes go hand in hand. So I'm also going to link that so you have that to check out, and I can focus on the practical aspect today and not the concept. So you want to build work capacity for multiple reasons. One, because if you reinforce your cardiovascular system, it means that you're not going to be limited in your training and you're never going to have to stop a set because you're out of breath. And we all have went through that experience once in our lives. You're training legs, usually it's on squats. You know you have more in the tank, but you cannot breathe anymore. And the sensation of having to catch your breath with a heavy weight on your back psychs you out of the lift. And so you have to re-rack, even though you had more. That needs to be avoided at all costs, and thankfully it's not that hard. Meaning that for me, you should never get out of breath doing deadlifts or squats, even in high rep ranges. You should avoid that at all costs, and that can mean reducing your tempo, or that can mean heightening your cardiovascular system. So that's for the lung portion. In terms of the ability to actually use the muscles, that's the aspect of work capacity that has more to do with programming techniques. The reason why you want a very strong work capacity in that sense is because having a higher muscular endurance allows you to tax the baseline more and more and more, and with time that leads to growth. You will find that when you look at the three portions of the trinity of programming, at some point, the only way you're going to be able to do more volume or add up or boost the frequency of the training is going to be to lengthen the session. And that's when you might deal with certain difficulties because you're not going to be able to replicate effort. And I know a lot of people like this where they'll be able to hit a weight for 6 reps, but then after 3 minutes of rest, when they try to do it again, they can barely get 3 or 4. And that's not normal, because unless there was some differences in technique or form or something in the context or the environment changed, you should be able to maintain a strong muscular endurance in between sets. And if your performance crashes that much, it's a sign of poor work capacity. So that's the application of work capacity in the gym. Outside of the gym, it's recovery. If you deadlift and you have to wait another 10 days before you deadlift again, you have poor work capacity because your ability to recover from a session is low. That, and you most likely also have bad form. So how do you fix that? How do you get better at it? Well, first off, you're going to have to skew your training towards that. Too many people don't realize it, but our training is too focused on intensity and not enough on set repetition and multiplication. So my advice would be, instead of doing something like 2 sets of squats where you do 5 reps or 6 reps or even 3 reps, try and do 3 to 4 sets with a little bit more reps and a little bit less weight. You will find that yes, progression is going to be slow that way in terms of weight on the bar. It's going to be less intense in terms of absolute term, not in terms of relative term, because you can achieve the same intensity percentage with low weight if you up the reps. And that's what I'm telling you to do. And that is going to accomplish what you want. It's going to build the work capacity that is needed so that when you progress again back up to a heavier weight, you have the ability to handle. And you might tell me, okay, but doesn't that sacrifice too much progression? What about tonnage? Well, the solution to that is evolving rep ranges. So for example, you could be doing something like a 1 to 3 sets of 3 to 5 or 6 reps. 1 week, you're going to be doing only 1 set of 3 reps, that's super high intensity, maybe 2 sets of 4 and then 3 reps, that's still very high intensity, while on the other hand, at some point in the training, you'll be doing 6, 5, and 4, which is much higher in terms of volume and tonnage. All of that is explained in the Evolving Rep Range playlist, but it basically allows you to cycle between very intense sessions and more volume-oriented sessions. And the two hand in hand, when they actually follow each other in a quick succession and they're not participating inside a block, they're not part of a block, can actually be very beneficial and is what I recommend for bodybuilding. So that's a dog outside. That's how you approach building work capacity in that environment. And another thing that is going to be key is, again, with the set multiplication thing, set multiplication happens within the session, but it also happens within the week, meaning that you're going to want to aim towards training more often, because the only way to get better at recovering from training and the only way to get better at actually handling the training while you train is to push the performance there. If you always remain, he's really angry. If you only remain within the same brackets, you'll never be able to expand the brackets, and therefore it's going to be up to you. It's your job, and it might mean again sacrificing some of your lower rep ranges for a while, doing higher reps for higher sets for a while, and then going back to your lower sets and seeing the fruits that it bared, because you might find that your work capacity has greatly improved. The only issue is that if you then just go back to lower reps, it's going to degrade again. So there's going to have to be other strategies put in place. And for the other strategies and to maintain that work capacity you built, I highly encourage doing lower body lifts in higher rep ranges as a staple in the program, not just as something that rotates. Meaning that besides the strength work that can be low or high intensity, you also want to have at least one variation of a squat or a deadlift, a knee flexion or a hip hinge somewhere in the program that is a staple that you do every single time that day shows up, that is done with high reps. And of course, a weight that is going to be slightly lower, because when I say high reps, I mean 8 to 12, 6 to 10, don't go lower than 6. And the goal is that, yes, this is going to be challenging for the muscles, of course, but it's also going to be extremely challenging on your cardiovascular system and the work capacity. And you will find that I personally promote that with the lower body lifts because they tend to be more taxing. It's going to be tough to overtax yourself doing overhead press. That being said, also understand, and I'll get to that when I talk about the cardio specificity aspect, that the body part and the muscle group you train to become more endurance can be having an impact on the entire body. If you do lower body, it's taxing for the entire body because it's really a full body movement, but it doesn't mean that you need to neglect the upper body. I'll get to that. So this is the strategy that I think you should implement to build your work capacity. You actually have to focus on it, and I advise against doing pockets of time where you only work on the work capacity, because for the most part, this tends to be junk volume. If you're just going to have a pseudo deload week where you only do low weight, high reps, that's not going to build much of anything, because in terms of specificity, you're trying to build your body up to handle heavy weight. And that's when we get into the cardio specificity aspect. So, I personally only do cardio with weights. I never go on an elliptical, I don't do Stairmasters, I just lift weights. And as I explained, I do that, I explained that in the previous video, I do that with giant sets, I do that with high reps, and it sort of skipped my mind, but the way I do it with high reps for the lower body is the way I prescribed for you that I'm going to explain now. Pick a variation of the squat, for example, that you know is going to be very challenging, like a pause squat, and do it often. Do it often enough that it becomes a building block for your work capacity. Same for the deadlift. Pick the Romanian deadlift. The Romanian deadlift is a good way to build work capacity while not being so overtaxing that it's going to damage your ability to perform on the strength work. So to go back to the specificity of the cardio, I know a lot of people, especially bodybuilders, who do a ton of cardio with certain means like, Stairmasters, jump rope, they run on treadmills, but they don't really know why. Because in reality, you could be doing something different. You could be doing a rowing machine. You could be doing some swimming if you want it. So why do you do these things? Well, most people do them because stereotypically it has become the orthodox method of cardio for bodybuilders. But I'm telling you that it's one, not specific, and two, not necessary. you can and should, in my opinion, do cardio specific work. And that is going to mean looking at what in your program is the most taxing on the cardiovascular system and finding a way to make it easier for you in the long run. And that can be a lot of things. As I said, it can be the variation aspect. It can be reducing the rest period in between sets of exercises where the performance is not super important, which includes doing giant sets. And overall, finding ways to make it suck. Because in reality, yes, strength training and weightlifting is tough, it is, but it's not super tough on the metabolic system as a whole, meaning that you can really take as much rest as you want, and therefore the tendency to end up catching your breath, the need to actually catch your breath can be completely avoided if you just want to be lazy. So it's going to be up to you to actually seek it out. And too many people think that you can only achieve that if you run, but in reality, try and do a giant set where you do 10 reps of lower body movement, and then you do some sort of weighted carry, and then you do some sort of ab movement. I'm guaranteeing you after this 3, you're going to be panting for air. And that's cardio, that's blood pumping, and that's your heart working. So that works, and it's specific. And what I call specificity is the carryover that you're going to get from it. Because between running on the treadmill for 30 minutes or doing 3 sets of post squats, what do you think is going to have the biggest carryover to your leg size and to your squat? The post squat. And a lot of people will say, well, okay, but it's also more taxing. Well, of course, it's more taxing because it's building something, unlike the treadmill that is really building nothing. Therefore, you should integrate that in your program with in mind the fact that it comes with a recovery cost. But it's the best way to save time, so that you don't waste time doing cardio, because you do cardio when you do your weight training, and it's going to have more of a synergistic relationship with the rest of the training, which makes a ton more sense. And that can also lead for the upper body movements, for example, to doing circuits. And it's something that if you watch my free programs, I love doing. I love having a giant set at the end of an upper body day where I'm just going to have the trainee repeat movements until they can't go anymore. Infinite sets, like a giant set of push-ups, and then lateral raises, and then face pulls ad infinitum is killer. Not only is it going to really help your upper body growth, but I guarantee you're going to be catching your breath. And it's going to also build into something that is actually quite funny, because as you do the set, the natural inclination that we tend to have when you do a set is you want it to be done as soon as possible. You don't want to do slow negatives. You don't want to do a slow tempo. But when you know for a fact that after that exercise comes another exercise with no rest, and that the only respite you get is if you slow up the tempo, you're going to slow up the tempo. So you're going to end up doing lateral raises with a very perfect form, slow tempo. Same for the face pulls. You're going to make sure you do that external rotation. All of that, why? Because you know that, 1, it allows you to be more performant on the next set, and 2, it's giving you a chance to finally catch your breath. So it's all benefits. And when you're done and you can't go anymore and the reps have stopped being quality, you go home. That's it. You've done what you needed to do. And you'll be perfectly Gucci if you do that. And this is mostly for bodybuilders, but that mindset can be applied to anything. If you are a strength athlete, like a strongman, an excellent way to do cardio would be do farmer's walk for distance. Instead of doing it with a weight that is really challenging on the traps and the forearms, why don't you just strap up and just go for a hike? That is going to be really hard on your cardio, and it's specific. Same thing if you're a powerlifter. The squat example was a good example. It's going to be tough to do that with a bench, because the bench is not really something that is going to make you have to catch your breath. But it can be done with something like a Romanian deadlift, as I said. It can be done with something like a rack deadlift. I have seen powerlifters put the bar underneath the rack with a shitty bar, and then they pull, and they try to pull through the rack. It's an isometric stretch. It apparently has carryovers to strength, and it's going to tax your metabolic system. It's going to be really tough. So it's something to keep in mind. You can do that for any other thing. You can do that for a soccer player. How would a soccer player do cardio-specific training? Well, let's say you can do something like You put 5 soccer balls in front of the goal, you shoot 1 penalty, you run a suicide back and forth, another penalty, suicide back and forth, until all of the balls are in, and then you have to run, collect the ball, put them back, and you start again. That's a good way to do cardio. You're going to have to find ways, in my opinion, to make cardio tolerable, because in reality it's really boring, but it's necessary for health and for performance. So you have to find a way to get it done. And to me, the best way to get it done is do something interesting in the meanwhile. And that is going to be doing something that correlates with your practice, with what you like to do. So that's going to be my advice for building work capacity and cardio specificity for bodybuilders. I hope this was informative. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.